Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of State Champs eSports Atari 2600. Today we are going to be playing probably my favorite arcade game, if not my second favorite arcade game. If you can't tell already, it is Centipede. The object is to shoot the centipedes before they destroy you, all the while trying to dodge spiders and other creatures, which I am not doing so well with. If you clear all the parts of the centipede, you will advance to the next level. Let me start off by first thanking our sponsors. We are presented by Lawrence Technological University in Southfield, Michigan. If you want more information about LTU, go to their website, ltu.edu. We are also sponsored by Army, Michigan and Hungry Howie's Pizza. Now there's a lot that I can talk about with Centipede. First, let me start off by just talking a little bit about my personal connection. I was a child of the 80s and I was addicted to Centipede. One of the reasons why I loved it so much, and I'm talking about the arcade version, the coin-op version, and I've played it many times since I was a child. If I'm ever at any retro arcade, this is usually one of the first games I'm going to go to, primarily because the game is so accessible. It's pretty much, along with PacMan and a few others, one of those staples that you can find pretty much anywhere that has video arcade games. One of the reasons for that is probably because the coin-op or arcade version was Atari's second biggest seller. One of the things that I really loved about it was the ball control. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with that, but it was literally looked like a white, almost like a white pool ball, and you could move your guy in pretty much any direction. It was very fluid, and because you weren't on a track or locked into a corridor or a maze like PacMan, for example, or Donkey Kong, where you could pretty much just kind of move along the different floors, the ball controller just made it one of the really unique, fun games. Now there's a bunch of interesting stories behind the creation of the game. For me, what's most interesting is that the co-creator was the only woman working at Atari at the time. As a matter of fact, I think she was one of the few women in the video game industry. Now, she wasn't the first. There were women. Oh, free guy. Hello. There were women in the video game design side before her, but considering she co-created the second most popular Atari game of all time, that will tell you a little something about just how influential she is, and I should give her proper credit by telling you her name. Let me just check my notes. Donna Bailey, if I have that correct. And she specifically wanted to work on a game that did not involve sports or overt violence. You know, we are talking about centipedes and spiders and bugs, things that most people would feel fairly comfortable with swatting and shooting and killing. Especially when you put into context the story behind the game, which I, to be honest, never knew that there was one until I was doing a little research for this stream. Apparently, you are playing as a garden gnome, and you have a magic wand, and you're using that magic wand to cast away all the invading centipedes, spiders, and other creatures of your mushroom forest. Now that was news to me. Never thought about it, to be honest, playing the game as a kid. I wasn't the kind of person that needed a story. I was just totally entranced by the gameplay. Now, one of the cool factors of designing the game that Donna had a big part of was the color scheme. I think maybe that was another reason that I really liked the game, was that it was a lot of fluorescence, it was very colorful, and it was unlike most other games. It wasn't a maze or your typical kind of outer space shooting game. Now, unfortunately, with the port for Centipede, while the gameplay is very similar, for one, you didn't have the ball, so using a paddle or even a joystick was a bit of a letdown right away off the bat. But other than that, the actual gameplay is almost identical as far as how the game plays, as far as the movement of the centipede and the spider, and even your character and how it shoots. Now, of course, the mushrooms have been replaced with rectangle blocks, and your little garden gnome, quote-unquote garden gnome, is another larger rectangle. But other than that, the color schemes are fairly close, if less detailed. And your movement is all the same, where you can move pretty much anywhere on the screen. Now, if you notice, the way I play, my style is I usually will stay at the bottom, very bottom of the screen, unless the centipede gets all the way down and I have to move up and out of its way. Just because, for me, it takes out one or two variables that I don't have to worry about. And to be honest, you can't really move that far up anyway in the game. You can see it's only probably about 3 or 4 rows there. So let's play it safe. And I guess in that respect, it is a bit like, by staying on that bottom row, it is a bit like Space Invaders or Galaga or Demon Attack, which I just played, where you're just kind of moving side to side. So maybe that's one of the things that I also liked about it so much and made it so unique, was that you weren't locked in to that back and forth pattern. You could kind of move in a lot of different ways. Now here's what's interesting is as good of a port as the game is, or at least as good as it could have been for the Atari 2600 at the time, it didn't commercially do all that well. It's not, the Centipede port for Atari is not even in the top 20 best-selling Atari games. I thought it would have ranked much higher, although if you use myself as an example, I don't believe I ever owned Centipede for the Atari 2600. So I have owned other versions of Centipede for home video or home arcade, but not the Atari for whatever reason. Maybe because I was so devoted to the arcade coin-op Centipede that this just was too much of a letdown. I've talked about the horrible PacMan port that I did own as a kid, and maybe that spoiled me or soured me to getting the other big games that I loved for the Atari, just because they paled in comparison. But I have to admit, now that I'm playing this, besides the crude graphics, it's actually pretty solid. I'm enjoying it. The sounds are very similar. And since this was one of Atari's own games, you could tell they maybe had a little bit more access to coding and other elements to make the port solid. Now, one game that I never got into, I mean, I did play, was the sequel. They made a sequel, of course, because you've got the second biggest selling game for Atari. You know there's going to be a sequel. Ooh, that was a bummer. It was called Millipede. And so, played it a few times. I guess I just was too much of a Centipede fan. I didn't need a sequel. I could just kind of keep playing. It's not like a movie where, you know, you played the movie and you know what's going to happen, and, you know, you want to see new scenarios. That was definitely not the case for me. Maybe if I had beat Centipede, or I was so good that I'd become bored with it, but I didn't have enough quarters and time to be able to totally master the game. Ooh, you see how they drop down? It's weird though. One of the hallmarks of the game is that the Centipede can sometimes just randomly shoot down at you. Got the bonus guy that just flashed across the screen there. See how they just dropping straight down? Normally they'll kind of wind back and forth across the width of the screen, but that does not appear to be the case for some reason. Maybe once you get past a certain point. Shoot. Yeah, so when they come down that fast and you kind of caught unaware, you got to start moving off that bottom baseline. Alright. Doing so well, and then I just hit a bad streak here. Let's see if I can redeem myself. Ooh, oh, shoot. I tried pushing the envelope there, and I could not do it. Now, if you remember our discussion of the movie Pixels on a previous episode, you will remember that Centipede was one of the featured video games in that movie, one of the quote-unquote levels that the characters in that movie had to take on and defeat. And because of the success of that movie, even though it was not very good, they are supposed to be making a Centipede movie along with Missile Command. So yeah, that must have been the episode that we talked about. The movies, this Missile Command episode. Ooh. Shoot. Alright, let's see if I can get a little bit. I'm going to go off my normal strategy here, and I'm going to ride it all the way up to the highest part, at least for the time being. See if that approach maybe helps me out here. Maybe playing it safe at the bottom of the screen. I think the reason why I got into the habit of going on the bottom line was that because then the spider could not attack you from underneath. Whereas when you're up floating around, the spider can pop back up on you. Now, when I was doing the research about Donna Bailey, who made the game, that made me think of the incredible TV show Halt and Catch Fire, which, well, at least for the second season, I think the first season was based mainly around the guys, but what made that show so great was that as the seasons progressed, you know, it might have even been the second or third season, the female characters who were the supporting cast became the leads. And one of the designers, Cameron, I believe was her name, was a game designer. And so I don't know how much, if any, was inspired by Donna, but the other female character who was more the business side, even though she did have computer and programming experience, her name was Donna. So, coincidence maybe, but I think not. So if I ever get around to moving off of Atari 2600 and doing some streams and shows for the coin-op arcade games, you know Centipede's going to be right up there. And if you remember from the beginning of the episode, I did hesitate in saying that it was my favorite game, because my favorite all-time coin-op game has got to be Galaga. And so it would be, as much as I love Centipede, it would be hard to say that it's my favorite game. It's a very, very close second. I probably cumulatively played Centipede as much as I have Galaga, but just based on sheer fun, I would have to give the edge to Galaga. So I don't believe there was ever a Galaga port for Atari 2600, but there was a Galaxian. So perhaps that would be my next episode. If you have any requests on old classic Atari games that you'd like to see me play and talk about, just drop those in the comments, and I'll be happy to accommodate. Alright, so I think I'm going to make this my last game of the night here, folks. So just see how long I could stretch it out. Oh boy, it really came down hard and fast. Okay, got a free guy. That's good. That'll stretch out this last game a little bit more, hopefully. And ooh, gotcha. Let's see. Ooh. See, in the arcade version, if you set up a bank, two banks or rows of mushrooms, you can kind of trap the centipede into coming straight down, and then what that does is that allows you to just pick them off rapid fire style. The problem with this version is that they kind of just randomly do that, and so you can never really be in a good place to predict when you're going to come crashing down. Ah, shoot. I was trying to get that last piece before they respawn. Okay, there we go. That's kind of what I was talking about. I was luckily in the right place to pick him off. Oh, another free guy. All right. There we go. Uh-oh. That one, they came crashing down in multiple parts on the screen. That is weird, wacky stuff, as fake Ed McMahon would say. Alright, 24,000. Doing good. Still got a couple guys alive. Other thing you often will want to do is clear out as many of the low-lying mushrooms as possible, so that A, they're not in your way, and B, they don't cause the centipedes to change directions quite as frequently. Come on, there we go. Okay. Bummer. Okay, well, that looks like it's it for me tonight, folks. Thanks for watching. Remember, give some love to our sponsors, Lawrence Tech, U.S. Army, and Hungry Howie's. For everyone at State Champs eSports, this is Denver, and we'll see you next time.